Hello, this is Delphina here to let you know that Screen Tones has launched a Ko-fi. Contributions go towards upgrading our equipment and software and helping Screen Tones find new and better ways to share our content with you, our listeners. If it does well, we could even increase our update schedule, so that's exciting. Go to ko-fi.com/screentonescast if you'd like to pledge, or share it around and help us spread the word. Thank you very much, and enjoy the episode.
Do it! Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams come true!
Hello and welcome to Screen Tones, a webcomic podcast. Today we're going to be talking about character design and what goes into making one that is effective, understandable, and memorable. I'm Crispy, my pronouns are she, they, and I make the comic Ghost Junk Sickness.
I'm Megan, I use the pronouns she, her, and I make the comic Sorcery Shenanigans.
I'm Finn, I use the pronouns they, them, and I make the webcomic Heirs of the Veil.
I'm Claire, also known as Clam. My pronouns are she, her. I make the webcomic Phantomarine.
Okay, so on the topic of character designs, of course, the first major question anyone ever asks are what are good character designs and what are bad character designs? And how do you sort of achieve that balance?
So always with topics like this, a lot of it is very, very subjective. It's very, very akin to personal tastes and vibes and stuff like that, what you're trying to do with the story, what you're trying to convey. So it's going to be all over the place. I can say I like one character and someone else can say that they think the design is butts. So it's going to be, like I said, all over the place. So what it kind of comes down to is what you personally want to kind of strive for and where the design aspect and the vibe aspect of your comic is kind of going for. Personally, for me, a good character design is something that I could recognize with the intent and the kind of vibe of the character themselves. And I know that sounds really okay, wow, that's a lot to go into design. But when they include stuff that has something like a character who wears, I don't know, for example, an oversized sweater and maybe some baggy pants, you have that indication that maybe there's someone who is someone that's a very comfortable character, or someone that likes to be cozy or stuff like that. And there's just those little key details that can kind of give that little taste to something that goes to what their character is in general. And then you kind of think about having that balance too, because on that kind of idea of putting designs in that would make a character have their characterization kind of show out, you don't want to overload it and be like, okay, so I'm going to design a character that is really into, I don't know, Fortnite, and give them a bunch of Fortnite stickers, but they're also really into lacrosse. And so I'm going to give them, socks that show that, and so on and so forth, right? So you do want to get to this balance. And so often I say, look at real life, look at people who kind of give those vibes, understand what you're kind of going for, and go from there, I think is a good starting point.
I think for me, there's a big thing where I never want to design something that's too I actually went to graphic design school, and they always talked about put out a whole bunch of designs that are kind of the obvious ones first, and then narrow it down to something that's a little bit more unique, but still conveys, the vibe that you're going for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something where I know I've struggled with it, where I've got characters that I want to convey a lot of things through, but I also am I don't want to be so on the nose with certain things or give every bit of information about that character all at once. It can be so overwhelming. It can be kind of boring as well. There's a balance between a design that makes you go like, oh, I know who this character is, or at least I have kind of a general impression of what they might be. That could be subverted. There's a lot where I also want to have people asking questions like, why does that character wear that bracelet, or why does that character have a sash around their neck? Like, what is that? There's something there that kind of lends some mystery to it. I like the character designs that are both obvious in some way but also kind of mysterious in another one, in terms of just all the detail that you can add but the details that you leave out too.
I really like that point about having those details that make you think about them too. And it's so true. It's something that could be totally tantalizing, having something that's kind of like a little bit weird or just mysterious on a character that lends to the narrative that you're asking about as well.
Yeah, so I was just thinking for a second about what you've said, and I think that sometimes it's just these small details that can elevate a character design or something that's totally subtle. Like, I sometimes have character designs that I think are kind of bland, kind of boring, and then you add, I don't know, some pointy teeth, and suddenly the character design is perfect, and I love it. But
Exactly.
yeah.
That's all you need half the time.
The pointy teeth. Yeah, but coming back to the question of bad character design, I think I absolutely agree with what Crispy said. In my opinion, there can be bad character designs, and I think it's those that reinforce certain stereotypes about
Hmm.
specific groups of people, or that are derived from like a harmful tradition of portraying people in certain ways. And that's like, I don't know, something like racial stereotyping, or what we also see a lot, like anti-Semitic stereotypes,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
things that go into body shaming. Like, if we look at a lot of now iconic Disney villains, for example, we see that there is like the types, the designs, and how their bodies look is kind of connected to a sense of morality. So I think that's something that we, as people who design characters, have to be a little bit thoughtful of, because it is something that's like ingrained in our society and in our understanding. A lot of this is internalized, so
Hmm.
we cannot really get rid of it unless we think about our design processes and why we design characters the ways that they are. And what I have been doing, and I think what I want to talk a little bit, because I think it fits another question better, but what I've been doing is like take some of these kind of traits that are seen as not conventionally attractive and put them onto characters and make interesting, well-rounded characters with that, to find like one, to like broaden my horizons a little bit, to diversify the characters I design, but also, and that's gonna sound a little bit cheesy, but to find like a little bit of self-love,
Oh, I
because
love that.
yeah, because a lot of traits that are generally seen as ugly and as morally kinda bad, like that are associated design
Hmm.
wise, are traits that I have also. So I want to create like positive characters with these traits, so I can find a little bit more positivity within myself.
Yeah, I really like that you have that, kind of such a deep connection to that because, and all in all, it is an extension of the self when you write these stories and portray stuff like that. So it's just like, do question yourself. Why do I put these kind of designs in characters? What am I trying to say, and what do I want to kind of come away from it? So I think it's a really really good point to kind of keep that in the back of your head. Look at what your peers are doing, learn from their experiences, and have that connection that really kind of hones into something that has more messages that you would think that a character design could tell. And I think that's really really important to kind of go with.
One thing on the Disney villain front that I wanted to talk about very quickly is why I love Gaston, because Gaston
Yes.
is like It's like you look at him and
Yes.
you're like, that's a hero sort of body type, stereotype, chiseled jaw. But you look at him and you're just kind of like, I know this is a villain, but you could easily spin a story where this is the
Yeah.
hero too.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
Oh, it's such a good point.
Yeah, I love that.
So, I think to Finn's point about the bad character designs being more racial stereotypes, I definitely agree with that aspect. Because I think otherwise, I don't have anything personally that I would consider a bad character design, just something that maybe more technically doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, like Claire, I went to college specifically for art. I went more for animation, so that's where my background kind of comes from. So I tend to look at things from more of a technical aspect of how they work. Is the silhouette really clear to read? Do you not get it confused with another character on screen from like far away? That kind of thing, especially if you have multiple kind of like main characters in your story. They all need to like stand out, kind of like with Sorcery Shenanigans. I mean, I have 6, so when redesigning those, it was a bit hard to each make them look like main characters, but not stand out more than the others.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's more of like not making somebody have the same color as someone else, just little things like making sure that every design has something different than someone else so that you don't get them confused. But when
Yeah.
I would say more to the character design that doesn't really work is when I initially made Sorcery Shenanigans very many years ago, so long ago that I barely have any photos on any hard drive of anything anymore. So it was hard to find any of this. But Tempest used to have bunny ears, spiky wrist, like I guess bracelets, buttons on their jacket, fluffy like hood. It was a very complicated design that I just obviously I did not know what I was doing.
Sounds like
And
something
you
from
could
Ghost Junk.
wow. See, but that brings it to my point. Like you could make it work. You could make something like that work. Maybe just not the way I was doing it. There's there's
Mm-hmm.
there's a way to make a design work. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you could make almost any design you could think of a possible character design, but maybe not with all the elements you're initially thinking of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Kind of like how Clam was talking about like designing characters and then like doing a bunch of the designs first and then kind of like chiseling it down from that. Clam, if you
Yeah,
wanted to.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think Clam is definitely correct on that. Because like,
thank you. I have lots of experience doing that too.
oh no,
I remember Phaedra's first design, like she had like a pirate hat, and then I was just like, cool, pirate hat, and then I'm like, wait, I don't know how to draw this from multiple angles, and it looks
oh,
terrible from the
mhm.
side.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried looking around for like pirate hat references, and I found some that were cool, but in the end I was just like, I just don't want to draw this. I don't
Yeah.
want to do it. And that's
Yeah,
fine.
I had that with one of the designs for one of Tempest's original outfits. Very beautiful. I love it a whole lot. The design cannot be simplified and taken and you can't take some of the patterns away because then it doesn't look as nice. It looks too simple. And I didn't want to draw the patterns the same all the time. So I just scrapped it because I didn't want to have to like spend 4 hours on him in one panel.
Something that I've been thinking right now is that I think, like, between making a design work and not making a design work, is that maybe there's like, when the design doesn't work, that there's not enough focus on the theme, on what the character is
Mm.
supposed to represent. So you're kind of like putting parts together and they have something to do with the character, but there's maybe nothing that really binds them like a focal point within the character design.
Yeah, and kind of like a continuous like little pieces or imagery and stuff like that. And you know, I will definitely sing Claire praise here in her comic Phantomarine, how she has a lot of these shapes that lend into thematic purposes in some of her character designs. Specifically, I'll talk about how Phaedra is created with like that Manta Luna kind of imagery, where they have like the manta at the top of her lapels, how the blue kind of fades, the way that their hair kind of like goes with a lot of like the themes and the water, and then even the sword kind of fitting with everything. It's very, very pleasing, and it's very, very thematically tight.
Thank you. That's very sweet. I on the opposite side of it, I always talk about how interesting it is. Like when I post a picture of Phaedra on Twitter or anywhere, like Phaedra always gets the most attention, like from people that don't read the comic, because they're just like, oh, she's probably a ghost because she's kind of pale and blue. She's got a sword. That's cool. And like, I don't know, just there's enough information on the character where they're just like, okay, I get it. Simple, cool. I like it. On the other hand, like, I love Cheth, but Cheth is very hard to read initially, and part of that is intentional, but a lot of people are just kind of like, all right, you got a vampire. Like, why is there a vampire in this comic? And I'm just like, you know what? Fair point, but the funny thing happens, like, it's not an effective character design at telling you anything about him initially, but then when you actually see him in the comic and how he interacts with things and how he quote unquote moves, because it's not animation, but like I try and convey it, people are just like, okay, like the character design doesn't really scream ocean god, but I still get it, and everything else is kind of in service of that. Like it's something that I've struggled with, because I'm just like, I love this character design. I know it's not effective though, but like I didn't want to put him in like a friggin' Poseidon like crown or like, ooh, I'm covered in kelp. I didn't want to do that. It's like there's reasons why he doesn't look like what you think he would look like, and I will play with that, but it is kind of a hard sell initially, and I'm like, all right, I have to deal with that.
Like, to be totally honest, I think the design is kind of effective though, because like it sets certain expectations. The first time I laid eyes on him, I was kind of like, okay, he's kind of like slimy, sleazy dude. And it kind of set certain expectations for me, and the
Yes.
comic itself then kind of subverts these expectations and also plays with them. So I think that's what makes his character design so effective, that you get these expectations and then these expectations are totally subverted in some parts, and in other parts they, I don't know, get kind of questioned because he's such a mysterious character.
Thank you again. It's kind of how I feel about something like I was thinking about the other day, like Undertale, where like you've got all these different kinds of character designs. Like they're all supposed to be some variant of monster, but you know, and you go into the game if you don't know anything about the game, and you're just like, I have to fight monsters. But then you're like, okay, something's like there's something here that's underneath the surface, and there's a lot underneath the surface, and it's like playing with that expectation of like, ooh, this character looks like a big beefcake hero guy, but he's a monster underneath, sort of thing. Like there's character designs that are meant to be, I guess, deceptive in that way too. Or like they're feeding you a little bit of information, but then like part of that information is a lie also. So it's yeah, if you're talking about utility of character design, like you want to show people like, you know, this is what the character kind of is, but there's going to be something else there that, yeah, maybe you can play with underneath the surface.
Totally. Absolutely love that.
We know that comics require to draw the same details again and again on every page, basically. So how do we choose and understand the detail levels and the aesthetics that make sense for both like the general appeal and to prevent burnout from having to draw them all the time?
Yeah, so my process is extremely streamlined, and I think that's partially just because I figured it out at college, where I had some fantastic help. But I work off of vibes a whole lot. So generally, when I axe things, it's because the vibe isn't quite what I imagine, and that's partially because I usually start off the process by having already figured out the personality of the character first and figuring out what they act like. And so, like with, for example, Alex from my comic Sorcery Shenanigans, I already kind of knew that he was more of the kind of bookworm, stoic type, short temper, the planner of the group, and that also he was definitely going to be the healer. And so once I kind of knew his personality and sort of what kind of media I could pull from for outfit designs, I just pulled references from like different video games or like other TV shows, animation about what kind of cleric garb generally they wore. And then for my fantasy setting, I tend to take more of a realistic aspect and look at historical outfits. And so for him, I chose Hanfu, which is more of a Chinese traditional garb, to kind of mash together with his cleric to kind of give me a more concrete place for starting off of. But it's really easy to kind of take my process and transform it for different genres. And so for my next project is kind of a different tonal shift. It's more of the magical girl idol genre. And so that one has a little bit more concrete starting point because I take heavily from, of course, the magical girl anime that I've watched. And so one of the characters there is the very typical kind of princess type. And so you have to take the inspiration from kind of like the princess ringlets that a lot of them wear, kind of almost always sharp eyes, very fancy clothes. And so for her, I gave her more of a sort of very flowy outfit, very flouncy skirt to kind of give off those vibes.
I know for me, it's a combination of, I guess, working with a silhouette that is going to be really easily recognized throughout the comic, like even at a distance. That's kind of what I think of first, because you want characters of varying heights and body types and colors as well. I know for me, one of the big problems that I've had is like, I've been able to rely on kind of color coded characters for so long, and then I'm finally like, I have to have a squad of characters that all have the same kind of color palette. And that was interesting to play with because I was like, okay, now the problem solving changes where I have to have different, I guess, amounts of those palette colors in those characters, to the point where like, I don't know if anybody's ever seen those little kind of graphic designs. I know they've done them with like cartoon characters and things throughout the years, but like just like little bars of color where you can immediately tell which character it's supposed to be, like SpongeBob or Finn and Jake from Adventure Time, like just from the color palette and the amount of color on that little, I guess, combination of colors. Like it's an interesting sort of thing to be like, how can I make this theme work across several characters? And yeah, it's something where I also try and think about shape language. Like Phaedra is based around a spiral. Like you see it in her hair, you see it in her sword, like, and I like the idea of a spiral as like, it's a very easy thing to draw, but it can also kind of convey this sense of like change or turmoil, but also like elegance. And then Pavel is based around a triangle where it's very stable. You know, it's the most stable character in the comic, arguably. So it kind of works for that. And then Cheth is interesting because like you would expect Cheth to have like all of these like kind of sharp triangle shapes, and he has them in his teeth. But like the rest of him is kind of square and boxy, like in his tattoos and everything too. It's like it's kind of playing with the idea like this thing looks dangerous, but it might not be as well. Like it could easily fall into a good character so long as he doesn't open his mouth, sort of thing. But then if you're trying to draw these characters a lot, you can rely on shorthand in those little, I guess, shapes and designs. But like I know I ran into big issues with Cheth because like his first appearance, he's in a crowd form most of the time. Like he appears across lots and lots of ghosts, and I didn't want to draw tattoos on all of them, but I had to. But it was easier because like I'm not drawing like super detailed, like incredibly realistic, like I don't know, floral or Maori tattoos across a whole bunch of different characters. So if you're going to streamline, like it might still be hard, but just find some way of making it even slightly easier as you go along, because you're going to be drawing a lot of this character, and there might be like one detail you can add that you might end up being like, I hate this, I don't want it on the character anymore, and then you just change their clothes. Like, characters can change clothes, it's okay. Like, I literally, there are ways that I drew the characters in the first chapter that I was just like, nope, I never want to draw this again, and so I changed the design, and now the new design, I found other things where I'm like, nope, I never want to draw this again. So it's like, I'm changing it as I go. I'm learning as I go. And I mean, manga artists do the same thing. Characters have like different arc outfits, and there are reasons for that. So streamline as much as you can. My goodness.
Yeah, first of all, characters can have different outfits, and that is a very great point. And it is a point I still need to learn. For me, you definitely do along the way kind of figure out details you don't really need, and you kind of drop a few things. But I also tend to do that before I even start. I draw it a couple of times, and if there's some things that I'm naturally already dropping off before even like drawing them, like for 5 pages, then I just ditch them. They're not working.
Mm-hmm.
If you're
Mm-hmm.
already dropping them off and the design is great without them, you do not have to stick with them.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, I have a nice little kind of advantage with some of the things. Now, I've been told that my designs are complex, and I don't see it that way, but I understand my designs are kind of stupidly complex. But I can get away with that because of the production schedule that we have. So I have a co-creator that I work with. So when it gets into design time, she's in charge of all the designs. I think I've only designed actually a handful of the characters in Ghost String Sickness. But what usually happens is because my co-creator and I have two different styles. It took us years to get to this point where we had to merge styles so that it looked like the comic was always consistent, because I would ink it as she would draw it. And we did the same thing when we started designing the characters as well. So she'd start with this design, and I'd be like, cool. And then because I have my own biases and stuff like that, it was easy for me to kind of choose and look at stuff that I'm like, oh, you know what? That doesn't work. Like, elevate this and stuff like that. So it was this nice little workshop that we can go back and forth and then figure out, okay, does this character need all of this, I don't know, detail, or do they not have enough detail when I'm inking and when she's drawing? So that constant feedback really basically narrowed down getting those designs aesthetically correct for what we were going for. And I did want to talk a little bit about aesthetic too. We've mentioned it a couple times in this episode too. And basically it's about keeping an eye on what works for not only the main character to be recognizable, but how they fit in their world that you're creating. So think of the comic in its entirety and make sense of the certain designs to sit, fit, and work. So like you'll have jarring differences in designs that can actually break immersion for the world that you're trying to convey. So if you have like a character that is just absolute in their swim trunks next to someone who's absolute super armored buff, but the story doesn't actually require for this to happen, it seems weird. It's like, why are we with the boogie board guy and doing such a weird thing with the knight? Unless it's, you know, intentional, then go for it. But yeah, definitely keep an eye on those aesthetics that you want to portray to kind of keep that appeal and the overall look of the entirety of the work. To do that and to prevent burnout, 100% what Megan Clam had said is just drop designs or little aspects that you feel is too much when you're drawing something, because you're going to be drawing it over and over again. That's the beauty of comic.
Yeah, I think that a lot of points were already covered. I especially like the points of like dropping what you notice doesn't really work for the design. I think how I prevent burnout and like manage the level of detail within the character designs is basically what Crispy said, that I try to make them grounded within the world, make them believable within the world. And I think I'm pretty lucky because it's not like a high fantasy story or science fiction or whatever. So the designs are, of course, like more grounded in a real world feeling. What I'm doing is I work with colors a lot, so I try to have complementary colors, complementary colors in the character designs, have like spots of colors that might make certain traits of the characters more noticeable. So, what I did with Victoria, for example, in the beginning was that she was wearing like darker clothing but a very light jacket. So, like her middle part was kind of framed within that. Um, yeah, so I'm working a lot with colors in that regard, and what I also do is that I give every character a very specific clothing style that even if they change clothes, the style is still coherent, and I kind of like work with that and try to keep it simple most of the time. I think I have one design of the doll that's kind of like more complex, but it kind of works because she's like the villain, so it's nice if she stands out as a more complex character and I don't have to draw her all the time. So that's also something that I think is important, that if you have something that you know you don't have to draw all the time, you can go more out on that. Yeah. And I think that's it.
So the last question that we wanted to talk about is something that I'm actually quite interested in, just looking at comics as they go along for several years. For everybody, how have your character designs changed over the years? What have you streamlined, or what have you added, and why?
As for me, they've changed drastically, and it's kind of funny. I consider a lot of their release in the comic what is kind of aiding their design changes over the years. And I mean, like, I think a lot about like inspirations with the story that I've had. And a lot of the inspirations that leave impressions on you can often change a lot of designs and ideas that you've had over the years. So, like, our main characters in the story, or my comic Ghost Young Sickness, Vaughn started out more as a super anime shonen looking sword wielding kind of person with a short little red jacket and ready to fight everything. And then what I wanted to do is in that time I was like, oh, I want to have something really, really unique. And I don't know why I thought this, but my tiny little brain was like really into this, is that I'm just like, okay, one day if my comic ever got super cool and recognizable, I want to make merch. So I had merch in my head when I designed some of the aspects of this character, when they wore um, a certain necklace or a little chain that was attached to their sword. And I was like, okay, this is their symbol. This is what describes them. This is really cool. Anyway, I dropped it because it just didn't match what the character is now. And it was just like kind of details like that ended up getting dropped as I went along. I even think of characters like the medium being completely formless when we first started designing them. They were just this massive amalgamation of a lot and didn't actually have much of a kind of a character form or something recognizable to be a character. And then we were kind of hammering out what their personality was as we were writing it or designing it. And I'm like, oh, I feel like this blob kind of fits this idea. So we kind of started morphing and doing the shapes, and they are what they are now, which isn't the most complicated or complex or even recognizable design, but I think it works for what it is, and it's kind of fun that things change that way. Should I pause?
Okay, so I kind of already talked about this, so I'll just sum up a little bit before I jump into a little bit more. But most of my streamlining happened during college, figuring out my process there. But that was also partially because of some good reference materials, which some of them are just like art of books. So it's also partially some good inspiration. And so I'm just going to list them here, so y'all can go look at them if you want. But some good ones specifically for character design that I found very helpful were creating stylized characters by 3D Total Publishing, as well as Character Design Masterclass Book 2 from Masters of Anatomy. Those were just very good kind of concepts for creating stylized characters once you have like the basics of anatomy down, kind of learning what colors we tend to associate with certain character types, like villains or heroes, and then also just like shapes. Like we were talking about Gaston from Beauty and the Beast and how his shapes and design makes you think hero, but because of his personality in the movie, he's more of the villain. And then some good art books. I have too many, so I just picked 3 so I don't shove my entire shelf into the podcast. But a few of my favorites are Over the Moon, specifically the Queen on the Moon has a very good design. Moana has good design just with almost all the main characters. Big Hero 6, for me, it's more of the concepts they didn't choose that are more interesting than the ones that they ended up choosing, that I kind of take more inspiration from. And then a super great kind of like resource to look at for paring stuff down and simplifying your concepts is the art book for My Little Pony the movie, because some of their concept designs are super complicated, and it's really interesting to see how they kind of went through the process of paring the design down for the final one that they use in the movie.
Can touch on what I've said earlier, that I try to incorporate traits into character designs that are kind of treated as ugly or less attractive, and try to build that into characters and character designs. So, what I basically did is I tried to diversify my characters a little bit, especially when it comes to different body types, mostly because I got kind of bored to draw the same character design again and again. Because if you look at my early character designs, like in 2008, 2009, they all looked very samey. You had like one girl body type with one girl face, and one man body type with one man face, and that was that. So yeah, that's basically it. I tried to diversify the body types a little bit more, to diversify how I draw faces, try to find some interesting details, like give characters bigger noses, wider jaws, a double chin, and so far. And yeah, and that's basically it. Because I also noticed that it keeps me more entertained when I'm drawing, when the characters look so different.
I definitely relate on the pushing certain details or certain shapes just to be different, because I know that I I was in a unique position starting the comic, because I grew up drawing lots of animals, and I grew up drawing honestly like anthros. Never went quite full furry, but I drew a lot of like half man, half animal kind of characters, and I struggled with drawing people. So I know that when you look back at my initial designs for the comic, and even like the first drafts of the first few pages, like a lot of the faces just look the same. And even now, like within the comic, there are 3 faces that kind of are identical, like at least in rough shape. Like Phaedra and Lady Cheth and Vanna like all have kind of the same, like, I don't know, like pointy oval shape to their face. And it's something that I've tried to move away from with other characters, but with those ones I'm just like, okay, I guess it's same face to a point, but it's also like there's nothing innately wrong with same face syndrome. Like look at Sailor Moon, like it still works, but you do want to try and fight it. So even if you repeat a couple shapes because you're comfortable with them, yeah, I like pushing it in other places.
I also think if you are able to change other design factors enough, the design still stands out. Like you mentioned Sailor Moon. I think Sailor Moon has like very interesting character designs that are very like easily distinguishable from another, so
Mhm.
you can still make it work even if you stay in that comfort zone. So like you said, I think there was a time where people were really bashing like same face syndrome, but I don't think it's like inherently bad as long as you can manage to make the character still distinguishable from another.
Yeah, I think a good example is actually, I was thinking about the other day, Full Metal Alchemist. A lot of the faces that she draws are actually quite similar in like, they're kind of blocky, they're almost square in a lot of ways, but it's like you look at that and there's enough difference in the rest of the character designs where you see it but you don't mind. I guess some people probably do, but I look at it, I'm just like, okay, you have a style, you have a comfort zone. Same with Bleach, same with other ones, where it kind of just becomes a distinct kind of trait of the comic. I know for me, a lot of the things that I've streamlined or changed, I've streamlined very few things. I've added more things because I've been more comfortable with adding things. I've gotten faster, so I feel like I can draw more detail, even though like I don't need it. But if I want a little bit more, I will. Like, I didn't put Cheth in a cape initially, partially because I didn't think about it, but partially because drawing fabric was very hard for me back then. And now I'm like, it's cape time. Let's do it. So I think there's other parts of characters. Like, I love how there's like a running joke amongst several people I know where, like, if they've got a character that has even slightly floofy hair, the hair just gets floofier. Like when you look at Pavel's hair when he first shows up and then Pavel's hair now, it's like literally one day has gone by in the comic, but it looks like it's grown and like floofened about 3 years worth. And I'm just like, this is just me taking something that I liked initially and just saying, I want more of it. Please, more of it. The other thing that I joke about a lot is how Chet's face has gotten longer. It's gotten very long compared to what it used to look like, and way more like angular, and like it almost looks it almost looks stupid in some poses, and it's kind of intentional. But I love the idea that like by the end of the comic it's going to be like stretching off the page, and I'm just going to be like, this is just how it is. This is inevitable.
And I think it's a really, really good kind of like point that you make there about the fact that it's been a day in the comic, but Pavel's design has changed so much. And like webcomic time plays a lot in some of the designs that you have. So don't be discouraged if a character doesn't look the exact same that they do in chapter 1 versus chapter 3. Because you will face that. You will face that slow kind of like you're getting used to a design and then, you're kind of adding little flares that make it, a little bit more solid and comfortable to your production output there.
Yeah, I think adding to that, your taste as well will also change while you work on your comics. So you will naturally, even subtly, just change character designs around. I know for me, like, Cord got rounder and rounder and rounder. He's just like kind of floofy now, when in the beginning he was not as floofy. So that's just what happened.
And it's just really, really cool to see characters creators get comfortable with their characters and designs, and it really reflects just what we are comfortable with drawing too. So I did want to ask, we're talking about character design a lot. What are y'all's favorite character designs that you've seen or types that you've come across? Like, let's just kind of indulge and talk about our faves here.
I really like the character design of Schmendrick from The Last Unicorn. He's just like, he has this very big prominent nose. He has this head. He has these clothes that are kind of like patchwork clothes, and you see him and you kind of know, like, you immediately know with his head he's like some kind of weird wizard, but you also know that he's not a prestigious wizard of any sort. He's kind of like a run down wizard. So you see this character design and you immediately know, okay, he's kind of like an asshole man, but maybe he's also kind of nice. deep down somewhere. So I think that's a very good character design that I love a lot. And then I remembered the Russian Snow Queen film,
Mm.
Oh,
and
that's a good one.
I
Yeah.
really love the character design of the Snow Queen in that film. Like, she's very angular in a way. Um, she kinda I don't know. She kinda looks very cold and interesting, and the shapes kinda just add to her cold look. Like, she's beautiful.
This is just like one of many because anytime I'm asked this question, my brain goes blank and it's like I've never seen a single piece of media in my entire life. But the one of the ones I immediately gravitate to is Akira from the Pretty Cure a la Mode series, specifically her transformed version, just because it's so easy to get the kind of tomboyish prince type vibe off of that design. And the motif, the chocolate motif and the kind of animal motif in her design is so readily available to your eyes that it's just so easy. Plus, I mean, I'm a sucker for magical girl designs, period. So maybe I'm a tiny bit biased.
My favorite character design ever, and it has been for about 25 years now, is Hexadecimal from Reboot. For anybody who doesn't know, Reboot is one of, if not the first, CGI cartoons that ever came out. Came out in 1994, so guess my age. I've loved it for years, and I have not found a character design that impresses me more than Hexadecimal, because Hexadecimal was born out of a necessity, or at least a need or a want, because they had all these characters that had, you know, lots of lip sync, lots of detail on their face. They had to blink, they had to do all this stuff, but they designed Hexadecimal to wear a mask, and it's a mask that she has several masks that she switches between, and it's something where like the rest of her design kind of evokes like witch or harlequin or like seductress in some later seasons, which is awesome also as well. But it's like, gosh, to see a character that's born out of an actual, like, I guess a technological difficulty that then you turn into a freaking amazing design that I've never seen, I guess, echoed anywhere else before. It's effective, it's easier to animate, it's just so cool. And honestly, now if you know that I love Hexadecimal, welcome to my comic. Big inspiration for Chev. So yeah, I think that I can't imagine another character like that. Perfect.
I like that you also talked about that reflecting in your own work. And I think that's key right here is that, you know, we start the episode talking about the tastes and it being very, very personal. And at the end of the day, it's just like, what are you inspired by? What impresses you? And that does kind of trickle down into the work that you create. With that, I will say that a lot of my favorite designs, fortunately and unfortunately, come from the Final Fantasy series, mainly and most of the time designed by my almost nemesis, I guess, Tetsuya Nomura. And I really enjoy the specifically a character from Final Fantasy X, Yuna. A lot of the designs or the aspects that went into her design are absolutely on point. The details that they have in her dress, the fact that she wears the boots, the staff that she has, everything goes together with the shapes. It's easily recognizable. It's very, very iconic at this point. And it's stuff like that that just really, really inspires me and stuff that I want to put into my own work as well. And it becomes a little bit of a hard balance because you don't want to put too many details. You don't want to put too many obvious giant Final Fantasy belts in there. But, you know, it's something that stuck with me. I absolutely love Yuna's design, the colors, everything. Silhouette, totally on point. One of my absolute favorites there. I had to bring up my nemesis. All right. And I think with that, that is a chicken salad Caesar wrap. I am Crispy, and you can find my work at ghostjunksickness.com.
I'm Megan, and you can find Sorcery Shenanigans on Webtoons and also on Comic Fury.
I'm Finn, and you can find Heirs of the Veil at heirsoftheveil.com.
And I'm Claire Clam. You can read Phantomarine at phantomarine.com.
I absolutely love Hexadecimal. Thank you for bringing her here.
I have to. I'm under contract.
Thank you for listening to Screen Tones, a webcomic podcast. Want to know some other ways to support us? Check out our Ko-fi at ko-fi.com/screentonescast, where your support will help us create more episodes, reach cool extra bonus goals, and keep us talking about anything and everything webcomics. You can also find us on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and our Discord server. Thank you so much for listening, sharing, rating, and supporting, and we'll see you next time.